Welcome back, boxing fans, to another great show with Sean Unboxing. So, Turki Al-Sheikh's next big, giant supercard is underway, and it looks incredible. But as a boxing fan and a positive person towards the sport, why wouldn't I be upbeat about it? Of course I should be. This is a great card. I'm always excited when Turki has these big dreams of what he wants, and he puts them together. I don't need to find fault, moan, and meander about it because this is great. We haven't had this kind of money and this kind of perspective or fresh look at the sport for God only knows how long. You may disagree with some of the things he does. You may not like some of the fights he sets up. You may not like the fact that many of these fights are in Saudi Arabia, not in front of huge crowds. It is what it is. Nobody's perfect, but you gotta like the guy's drive and his dream. And that's obviously beneficial to the sport of boxing. So let's talk about this proposed card. I'm not sure how much of it is cemented in stone right now, but needless to say, we all have been hearing the rumors, and it's pretty exciting stuff. Obviously, we have the Devin Haney fight with 147-pound WBO champion Norman Jr. And that's obviously a great fight. People are wondering who Devin Haney was going to fight. People are also wondering what Norman was going to do, especially now that Boots was no longer in the division. And you put these two guys in the ring together, there's nothing but positives you can say. This is a great matchup. Stylistically, it's very intriguing. I see ways both guys can win, and because of that, what's not to like? At this point, I don't know if it's a 50-50 fight, but it's pretty damn close to a 50-50 fight, so I'm excited. Hats off to both Haney and obviously the WBO champion, because this is exactly what boxing fans want to see fighters do. Then, most recently, the fight we've heard just get announced was David Benavidez versus Anthony Yarde. We all knew that David Benavidez needed to fight an Anthony Yarde or a Callum Smith. Anything below that would be disappointing and would bring up a lot of criticism towards a guy who's consistently clout chased Canelo Alvarez for the last 4 years, right? If you're taking on mid-tier bum-ass opponents, people are going to be critical, especially if you're always talking on social media. So we knew the two fights that made sense and that would actually get him a lot of credit would be Yarde and Smith. We know that Turki Al-Sheikh offered him a fight with Smith on the undercard of Beterbiev and Bivol. And him and his team walked away from it, poo-pooed fighting in Saudi Arabia, poo-pooed about taking a knee and sort of working with Turki Al-Sheikh. And so most of us sat back and thought, so what the fuck are you going to go do now? I mean, based on being promoted by the PBC in America, not a big pay-per-view star, with not a lot of opponents available to you, what are you going to do? Like, if I was Yarde or Callum Smith, why would I go to the States to fight you? What would be the point of that? I could make more money fighting in Saudi Arabia than going to the States, fighting in your backyard, and making less money. So it didn't really make sense. Couldn't really see how it was going to work out. So I wasn't shocked or surprised, of course, when Turki Al-Sheikh announced it and said that he's going to be fighting Anthony Yarde, which is a great fight. I said from day one that's a fight I'd love to see David Benavidez in, because it's a real telling fight. If he goes in there and is very impressive against Anthony Yarde, that is a true statement fight. Fighting a Vosdik who's been retired for 4 years, no. Fighting a Morrell who's a 168-pound fighter but has never fought a top 10 caliber opponent, no. Obviously, it's a great fight, but it doesn't determine how good he is at 175, right? Especially when we're putting him in conversations about potentially facing Beterbiev or Bivol. We need a true litmus test, and that is Anthony Yarde. So I think it's a great fight, really, really good fight. So nothing to do but take my hats off for both Yarde and David Benavidez. This is, from my perspective, the best opponent that David Benavidez has fought in his career. You may disagree, and that's fine, but that's my opinion. I think Anthony Yarde is better than everybody else he's faced so far in his career. And I think on Fight Night we'll see. Then, of course, some other fights we've been hearing as well. Most recent, today I think it was just announced, was a unification fight between Bam Rodriguez and Puma Martinez. Obviously, that's all based on Bam Rodriguez winning his unification fight against Cafu, which is happening this month. As I said in my breakdown to that fight, to me, it doesn't really make much sense to fight Cafu when you potentially could have went up to 118 and took out a guy like Junto Nakatani, which is a legacy fight. You fight some unknown South African fighter in some place that nobody knows who he is. It's not going to be a great fight to build you up or build your brand, especially considering you're at a smaller weight division. You need the kind of opponents that actually translate and people are familiar with. Puma, similarly, right? He's also a fighter that the majority of boxing fans don't know anything about. Hardcores, we know it's a fun fight. It should be a really fun fight. But as far as building Bam's name as a top fighter in the sport, well, we can obviously give him credit for becoming a 3-belt unified champion and being one fight away from becoming undisputed, which obviously is historic. We know how some fighters get tons of praise for becoming undisputed, so we would hope that the same kind of accolades would fall to Bam. I doubt that they would, but you never know. But the reality is, if you can do it, I can understand doing it. He's still young to become undisputed at 115 and then move up to 118 to become a 3-weight world champion makes sense, even though by the time he moves up, unfortunately, the biggest, baddest man in the division is going to be gone. So, obviously the biggest fights for Bam's career would be Junto or Inui. But it seems as if him and his team are on a completely different path, a path to obscurity, which is unfortunate because obviously he's a great fighter and on my pound-for-pound top 10 list. But obviously working with Turki Al-Sheikh on a mega card like this, it's going to give you attention. Even if the opponent is not somebody people are familiar with, it's the access that now people have to you. So people that maybe have heard of you but aren't so familiar with you, they'll be watching now because this card is just so stacked, so good. So of course they're going to be interested. And because of that, hopefully a whole new line of fans become familiar with you, especially if you do what you normally do against your opponents, which is style and profile. Then, of course, we got 2 other fights from the 135-pound division that are both being talked about as possibilities. I'm not sure if either one of these has been cemented yet in stone, but for what we already have, to add these 2 cards as well, with obviously the potential winners matching up for unification, Jesus fucking Christ. You gotta love boxing. I love when every fight leads to a bigger fight. When you can see how having this fight leads to this fight, which potentially leads to this fight, which legacy-wise is beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to see. And the good thing, just as a side note, for David Benavidez fighting on this Saudi Arabia card, it potentially opens the door for Tank Davis, because at this point, Tank Davis is the last remaining holdout to American fighters that are uninterested in fighting in Saudi Arabia, uninterested in bending the knee, uninterested in getting paid. So hopefully this opens that door up, so potentially we can get Bam on some of these big cards as well. Maybe even on this card, since we already have 2 other fights on the card that are for unification or for build up for unification. But let's get to it. Obviously, the fight most recently people are talking about is a potential Muratalla versus Andy Cruz fight. This is a great matchup. Obviously, at this point, I think Muratalla has to be favored. He's a far more experienced fighter. He's been fighting far higher level of opponents in the pros. Obviously, Andy Cruz was a phenomenal amateur fighter, right? 2-time gold medalist, I think, maybe 3-time even. But as a pro, it's a very different game. And we've seen lots of Cubans come in and just never really succeed, because unfortunately the Cuban style, while effective, is not necessarily the most entertaining of styles. So a lot of these fighters never really get much of a push in the American market. For Andy Cruz, obviously he's working with Boots Ennis' dad, and they're trying to refine his skills, make it a little more pro-friendly, and that's all good. His last two fights have been far more entertaining, but primarily because he's been more susceptible to getting touched and more vulnerable. And vulnerability is obviously something fans love to watch because it makes fights more exciting. We don't want to see someone who is untouchable because where is the competitiveness? Where's the competition? You want to believe that the fight is competitive and that either guy can win. And then obviously when one guy does something brilliant to win, you can give him praise for being better and finding a way that the other guy wasn't able to do. But if you're fighting guys that are just levels below you, how much praise can fans really give you? You're doing what's expected of you and nothing more. But I think the Muratalla Cruz fight is a great fight. Obviously, that's for the IBF title, which Muratalla was just elevated to thanks to Lomachenko's premature retirement, which is unfortunate being a Lomachenko fan, but that's part of boxing. So, you know, you got to take the good and with the bad in all aspects of life. Then, of course, the other fight from the division that's being talked about is Sam Noakes, the UK fighter, who is now the mandatory for the WBO champion, Abdullah Mason. And okay, to be fair, I'm not sure if Abdullah Mason's been elevated to that belt or if this fight is for the belt. You know, these two top level fighters at the WBO, the winner gets the title, which I think is the correct basis of that fight. But this is also a great fight. Obviously, Abdullah Mason looks phenomenal. Looks like a generational talent. The only problem is he's young, and the level of opposition he's faced so far has been limited. Sam Noakes, he's unknown, right? Well, his record looks good, and obviously he's a UK fighter. The question is he a domestic UK fighter, or is he a world contender? And we'll find out against Abdullah Mason, because he's skilled. And if you're coming in and it's fake skills and, you know, cardboard cutout type of fanboyism, you're going to be exposed really quick. So it's great. Obviously, we'd like to see potentially the winner of Cruz and Muratalla face the winner of Noakes and Mason for IBF and WBO unified titles at the 135-pound division, which leaves Shakur to potentially face Tank Davis to unify the WBA and the WBC titles. And then hopefully sometime in 2026, we could get an undisputed 135-pound champion. But I'm not crossing my fingers, but I'm hoping, I'm staying optimistic. But so far, that's what we've heard as far as this November card from Turki Al-Sheikh, and I mean, so far, so good. I mean, there's not much to be critical of. Obviously, you got a few fights that are lower level opponents, but then you got some really high level stuff going on as well. So it should be a very entertaining card. I'm stoked. But then again, whenever I hear new fight cards announced, I'm always excited. Let me know what you think about this potential November card, and what do you think?